Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Arsenal Ramble, where today we're going to be discussing Arsenal's fairly disappointing 2-2 draw to West Ham at the weekend. Has a feeling of deja vu, especially with how the game went in this game and the Liverpool game that preceded it. But to talk me through that deja vu feeling is my co-rambler, Dave. Dave, how you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. I don't know, actually. I feel a bit mixed. Like, on one side of the coin, I'm obviously really sad about the fact that we couldn't beat West Ham because it seems like one of those games where we really needed to get the 3 points here. Um, but then on the other side of the coin, we're still top of the league. 4 points ahead of City. Yes, they've got a game in hand, but it's still 4 points. It's just a bit disappointing, isn't it? That I suppose that's the word. You see some fans using the word bottle, and I really dislike that word because it's nothing. It's nowhere near bottling it. It's just a little blip, I think. But yeah, I think I just feel a little bit. Eh. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I completely echo that as well. And it's quite funny. I have a lot of people at work that have been really quiet over the last 6 to 8 months about the football. In fact, they've not really said a word to me at all. And then they're just starting to pipe up now saying, oh, Arsenal look like they're bottling it and Arsenal look like they're throwing it away. But how can Arsenal be bottling the league if it was never an expectation in the first place? Because, after last season, the expectation or the target for Arsenal was to get top four, get back in the Champions League. And that was kind of the minimum for this season. So for us to even be in this position in the first place is already not bottling it. It's us having a real go at a title charge, which is something that no one really expected us to do. If we were to end up not winning it after being in the position that we were in, it would be really disappointing and we'll all be very disappointed. But it's definitely not a bottle job. You're going up against a team like Man City that've got a Norwegian cyborg up front who's netted upwards of 32 goals already in the Premier League, and he's still got 8 or 9 games left to break that record. So, and they get goals from all over the pitch. So it's not a bottle job at all. But we've got to think of the positives. We are, as you say, still 4 points ahead. And we're in the more comfortable position than Man City. We've got the points on the board. Who's to say they don't have a perfect run to the end of the season? It's not a given. And I think we all expected that at some point we were going to have a bit of a bump in the road, and unfortunately, it's come concurrently with the Liverpool and West Ham game, and it feels like a bigger bump because it's been 2 games in a row, sort of thing, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I think that's it. And I think there's going to be twists and turns. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be 3 or 4 twists or turns till the end of the season, and it's just where those twists will be. I think ultimately what it comes down to, and I think it's what we've always known, is that game on the 26th against Man City. It's colossal, and if we really want to win the title and to prove that we deserve to win the title, we have to go there and we have to win, because a draw could still be, there are still pros to a draw. I get that, but if we can't lose to City 3 times in the season if you include the cup fixture, and then sort of claim that we should have won the league. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's just, we have to go there and we have to play like we deserve to win the title. And I think we have got the ability to do it. I think what's massive for me is we've just got that starting 11 that we have relied upon all season. And that includes big players like Saliba and Zinchenko and Jesus firing all cylinders. And even the other players that have been so consistent for us all season, like Saka and Partey and Odegaard, they need to be on the top of their game in that fixture as well, and that's what it's going to come down to if we're going to have all those things go our way, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's quite clear when we take a few of those big names out of our squad, then the quality can drop. So it's essential that we do have as many of these players to be able to come into this run-in and pick up as many points as possible. It's really interesting to see how we're actually going to fare in that Man City game. It does feel like it's always going to be a title decider, but I don't want to downplay the fact that we've drawn this game. But it doesn't really change anything in the grand scheme of things, because if we're going to assume that Man City are going to win all of their games, then if we had won this game and, for example, if Man City beat us, then they would be above us on goal difference sort of thing. And for us to draw this game, then they would still win like 2 points clear. So it doesn't make a massive difference in terms of if Man City still win all of their games. It just means that we've got to win all of ours and not lose at Man City. So it doesn't change a massive amount, but it is still frustrating because it would have been nicer to get the points on the board and then have that allowance to maybe drop points and get a draw away at Newcastle, for example. It means that we can't afford to do that now. We don't have that in the bank kind of thing. We need to be getting maximum points from every single game, don't we?
We do. And I think, again, this comes down to the experience difference between the two teams. I think the average age of the City team is around 28. Ours is around 24. So that's essentially 4 seasons worth of experience in those Man City players' minds. And that gives them that little tactical and psychological advantage of I've been there and I've done that. On the flip side, we've got a bunch of youngsters that are really, really hungry, and they've got a real opportunity here of doing something really special and essentially making history, you know. So, you know, it's going to be a really interesting game. And on one side, I can't wait for it. It's going to be such a brilliant game. But on the other, I'm absolutely dreading it because I don't know how I'm going to be able to physically watch it without hiding behind, you know, the sofa or whatever. So yeah, it's such a tantalising game, and fingers crossed we can get something.
Yeah, but before we actually get to that game, we're going to talk a little bit about the game that we played at the weekend and where things might have gone wrong for us as well. It's important that we can't just glaze over it. I'm afraid we can't just get past it. We've got to talk about it. So, team sheets is where we always start. Most notably, Zinchenko was actually out of the fold for the game, and we had Tierney starting. Now, for me personally, I was actually pretty happy. Obviously, not happy that Zinchenko wasn't in the team, but I was quite happy for Kieran Tierney to be able to get a start in a game like this. And he, in my mind, feels like an adequate substitution, an adequate guy to come in for Zinchenko when he's not there. What were your thoughts on Tierney coming into the first 11 for this game?
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying to you, because we watched the game together, when Tierney was selected, that it's such a brilliant option to be able to have off the bench, isn't it? Because in terms of an actual quality left back, that is what you get with Tierney. But what you don't get is that inverted sort of midfield presence that Zinchenko brings and that overload in midfield. I mean, we'll get onto this a little bit later, and Tierney did try that, but it didn't quite work anywhere near as effective as it would have done with Zinchenko there. But you know, I really like Tierney. I think he's a brilliant player. It's just there's a certain game that suits him, and there's a certain game that doesn't. And this, on paper, really should have been a game that probably should have suited him.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only flaw with Tierney is the fact that as a player in general, he's a cracking player. He's a fantastic left back, an amazing defender, and he's great going down the wing, putting balls and that sort of thing. But stylistically, he's just not what the team is set up and not what the team is designed to have in that position. The reason we've had so much success this season is because we've had that inverted role. we've had the quality of Zinchenko to be able to step in there and pick out passes and help build attacks from that area. And then that gives license to the likes of Xhaka to be able to bomb forward, which, you know, when you don't have that and you don't have someone stepping in there, then you have knock-on effects almost. You have Xhaka that has to be more reserved, and then all of a sudden the whole structure of the team is affected. So I can see why everybody likes Tierney, because he is a really good player. But yeah, it does definitely affect the way that we build things up. But that being said, it didn't have too much of a bad effect on us starting this game, did it? We actually started it like a house on fire, didn't we?
We did. Again, another quick start, like in the Liverpool game. We got off to an early goal with the man himself, Jesus. Was great play, to be fair, from Odegaard, who found White, and then he fizzes across back to the back sticks, and Jesus just taps it in, basically, doesn't he? So I think, is that 3 goals in 3 games for him now? Something like that. Anyway, he's on fine form since coming back into the team, and that is a really important aspect, to be fair. I know I keep bringing this City game into it, but if we want to win this game, we're going to be needing a fire in Jesus, especially with it being his old club. You know, he's got that little point to prove, and if he can go to Arsenal and then win the league by beating his old club, you know, what a way to do it. So I think to have an informed Jesus at the minute is really, really good.
Yeah, well, I completely agree, and I think it's impossible to ignore the City game, isn't it? We can't just forget about it, because you know it's right on the horizon. And yeah, it is really good to see that Jesus is. If there's any sort of silver lining from this game, it's the fact that he's scored again and he's keeping that consistent form. Because if he's scoring in every game that we're playing, then he's going to look like a constant threat. Which, you know, it was not the most, you know, amazing goal for him to have scored, but he has to be there and he has to be in that position to be able to tap it in, and that is all positioning, really, isn't it? And we've seen Haaland probably got 15 of those tap-ins this season, and everyone's raving about him. So yeah, it's really good that Jesus was there to score that goal, and it was a great pick out from Odegaard to find Ben White, who I think Ben White has been quite underrated this season, with how much attacking threat he actually brings. He was fantastic, especially in that opening half an hour, getting down the right hand side. So quality ball across, great finish.
Yeah, you're right. You know, that is something he's really improved upon. I would say since the World Cup, pre-World Cup, he was very much like he'd have little moments with Saka out on the right, but he'd never overlap him too much. Now you're seeing him invert and overlap. He just does what's needed at the time. Whilst always being back, ready to defend if needs be. So, yeah, he's really in good form as well, White, at the minute. And yeah, that was a great little run and a great little pick out at the back sticks.
Yeah, for sure. So we've raced into a 1-0 lead, and we're looking for a second. And boy, did we get a second. Not long after, I think it was 7th and the 10th minute, wasn't it, that we scored. So Martinelli gets the ball on the edge of the box, and he gets his head up and he sees that Odegaard is free at the back stick. Beautiful ball in. And then Odegaard, what finesse on this ball. He just cushions it almost into the back of the net. Really good goal. 2-0. We're cruising. We're in dreamland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2-0 up, 10 minutes to go. Like you say at the start of the podcast, it's like as if we're reliving the Liverpool game. And part of me thought, you know, oh God, are we going to have flashbacks to that game and sort of, I don't know what it is, but we seem to somehow slump back a little bit. I think the game's almost dead and buried at 2-0, when that's never the case in the Premier League. It doesn't matter who you're playing. And, you know, let's talk about the goal first, to be fair, because it was a brilliantly crafted goal. I mean, Martinelli as well. I think he had, is it Kufal out there that was sort of the man marking him? I think that looked like a huge mismatch. The right back just could not cope with Martinelli. And he was creating acres of space for himself, and that's exactly why he had so much time to pick that pass. So yeah, it was a great goal, great finish. I think you saw Jesus sort of asking for it as well. He was really begging for that pass to be again put back across to him for a little tap in, and that is normally an Odegaard thing to do. He's very unselfish like that, isn't he? He's almost a little bit like Özil, where he's always looking for the assist rather than the goal. But to be fair, I like that about Odegaard now. He's now got that eye for goal. So yeah, great goal. Yeah, not much more to say about it than that, to be fair.
Yeah, that is quite key for us to actually bring up the fact that what we've been asking of Odegaard is to be more ruthless and actually take shots and not always look for the assist, because a lot of the time it can get snuffed out and or you can miss-hit it, overhit it, and sometimes all you got to do is just try and welly it and it will go in. And he did that, and it was pretty much spot on. And yeah, as you say, we were both sat in the pub watching this game, and we had a little joke with each other, didn't we? We're like, oh, we're 2-0 up, we're cruising, and we're like, it can't be the same as what happened last week, can it? Like a bit of banter between us, and then, well, what happened following that was a bit unfortunate, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Like I was saying, we just seem to drop a gear, don't we? Naively, again, it might be to do with the age of the players, the inexperience of how to manage a game. But if you watch teams like City, when they're in this position, they go for the jugular, they go for more goals, they put that nail in the coffin and make sure that there is absolutely no option of getting back into this game. If they do concede a goal, it's 9 times out of 10 a consolation from a set piece or something like that. And yet we give silly mistakes away and almost just allow them back into the game. And once that happens, it's really, really hard to get back. So yeah, again, it was disappointing that.
So, well, should we talk about the way and the manner that West Ham actually managed to find this goal? So it all stemmed from someone who's been one of our most consistent performers this season, someone who you'd always rely on to be able to deal with this and gather it and be press resistant, and that's actually Thomas Partey. Now the ball comes to him and he just tries to flick it over Declan Rice, doesn't he? Something which 9 times out of 10 he'd probably pull off, but he had the opportunity to maybe pass it back to Ramsdale or to go either side, but he opts for the flick over. And in the moment, I genuinely thought that Rice handled the ball. And to be honest, still now I do think that there was an aspect of him handling the ball at this point. But it wasn't given as handball. So he then intercepted and ran through on goal, to which the ball then spilled out. And was it Gabriel who then overcommitted? And this is something which Gabriel tends to do a lot. He tends to panic when the ball's in the box and he goes to ground really quickly. I do feel like what you should do is stay on your feet, maybe try and usher them to have a worse angle and then rely on your keeper to be able to cover his near post. But yeah, Gabriel goes to ground pretty early, pretty easily. And then the contact is minimal, very minimal contact on the West Ham player. And he just gets barreled over, doesn't he? In fact, it does almost seem like it was simulation. I know I'm a little bit biased because I'm an Arsenal fan, but it's just it's both of them, isn't it? It's the fact that there was the potential handling of the ball then going through, and then the real light contact, and then the penalties given. In my opinion, I feel like if the penalty wasn't given by the referee, then it's not going to get overturned. But it's just the way that it happened. He gave the penalty, and then VAR didn't see enough to then overturn him, did they?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many aspects to this moment in the game that I want to pick out. The first being, the handball thing. For me, I've seen the images. He clearly sort of uses his arms in a way that sort of bundles the ball into his path so he can play in Paqueta to run into the penalty area. So I don't understand how that's not been. We watched the game without commentary, so I don't know what the commentators were saying. I don't know whether it got looked at VAR because I couldn't see them look at it on the screen. So I'm not sure what happened here. But for me, I'm just in any other game in the league, I've seen those given all the time. Any sort of brush of the arm, they're straight on it to rule out, especially if it's leading towards a goal opportunity or a penalty decision. So that's the first thing that I'm a little bit aggrieved about. And some might call me biased, yeah, but I would not be happy with that if it was the other way around. That's for sure. Like I don't think that would be fair. And yeah, you're also right about the Paqueta going down easily, but at the same time, Gabriel shouldn't be going to ground there. He sort of brings it on himself. The sort of contact is almost like Paqueta going into Gabriel once he's already on the ground, though. So I don't know if that changes things slightly. But for me, once you go to ground there, you're just asking for it. And this is something that Gabriel really did sort of like. He did have it in his game, especially earlier on in the season. I think he did it in the Spurs game where we conceded a penalty. I think it was Richarlison in the box, and that took it to 1-1, and it was a really frustrating point. But ever since that sort of situation, he's sort of ironed it out of his game a little bit. So to see that creep back into his game is disappointing because that really doesn't fill you with confidence when you've got those sort of players in the box. Because Holding is also a little bit liable for those sort of rash decisions. I mean, we saw it early on in the half where he gave a foul away just outside the box, gave them a dangerous free kick. That could have easily been a penalty had it been just a split second later. So yeah, not a great combination with those two at the back at the minute for these sorts of rash tackles. And we've seen it in the last two games, haven't we? We conceded a penalty in the Liverpool game too. So yeah, and then the third aspect is Thomas Partey. Disappointing performance from him. I don't want to get on his back too much because he's been brilliant this season. But we have to be honest and analyse his performance in this game. And yeah, it wasn't to his normal standard. I think everyone can see that. I don't know why. I honestly, I can't put my finger on it really. It just once West Ham started to get into the game, the pressure was too much for him. He couldn't get the ball and dish it out in his normal quick paced fashion. He just was too slow on the ball, too slow on the turn, and he just couldn't keep up with the game.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And the thing with Thomas Partey, to me, what really stands out is the fact that he's such a confidence player. Because in the first 20 minutes or so, he was fantastic. He was probably one of the main reasons why we went 2-0 up in the first place. He was on it. He was passing superbly and breaking the lines and calm on the ball. But then as soon as he makes a mistake in the game, it's almost like he's a Jenga tower and then everything starts to crumble around him. And one thing leads to another and then he makes an even worse decision. And then he's getting his passes wrong. And then all of a sudden he can't even make a 5-yard pass without getting it skew-if and maybe passing it out for a throw-in kind of thing. So he definitely speaks out to me to being a confidence player. And when he is confident, he's one of the best in the league. But yeah, today just wasn't his day after that first 20 minutes. And interesting what you're saying about Gabriel. Do you think there's a factor of Gabriel maybe overcompensating because of the fact that Holding has these flaws in his game? The fact that he sees himself as the senior centre-back of the pair, the player that needs to step up now, because him and Saliba are pretty much even. So they don't have to help each other out as much because they have faith in each other's ability. But do you feel like there's the fact that Gabriel overcompensates for Holding's flaws, and that he tries to go for these last-ditch tackles, and he's diving in to try and do as much as he physically can when sometimes it's not necessary?
Yeah. I think you probably hit the nail on the head there, to be honest. I think he does try and overcompensate to a degree. I think it's no sort of jab at Rob Holding, because I think he's done well in Saliba's absence to a degree, but he's just not Saliba. Saliba is verging on world class at the age of 21 or however old he is. He is a phenomenal centre back, and so is Gabriel. Their partnership is the best in the league, in my opinion. So I think when you just take that away, it just creates a little bit more chaos for Gabriel, and that's why you see him making these rash challenges more and more over the last few games. Which goes back to my point of why I really do want to see Saliba back at all costs. I'm hoping it's not worth it for this next game against Southampton, obviously, because with all due respect, that just has to be a gimme, doesn't it? It has to be a win. So if we can have Saliba just 5 days fitter, if then we'll do that.
Yeah.
However, I do think you've hit the nail on the head there, and it's almost poetic as well. Going back to the penalty, how it was Rice that dispossessed Partey in the midfield, and goes on to provide that goal opportunity, I guess, for West Ham, because obviously we've been heavily linked with Rice. So yeah, it was just frustrating as well.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of a glimpse at how much of a threat Rice can actually be, even though he's in a deep line midfield role, but he's still breaking the lines and he's creating opportunities for his team as well. It's the sort of thing that we could use in our team. But it's a shame that Mikel Arteta didn't whisper in his ear saying, look, if you want to come to our club next season, then you can't be doing things like this. You can't be scoring, creating opportunities against us. Yeah. But no, obviously, that's the thing with Saliba as well. I actually think that if he's not in the team against Man City, and I don't want to be a negative Nancy here, but I do genuinely think if he's not in the team against Man City, then we don't really have much of a chance against them. I really don't fancy Rob Holding against Erling Haaland. I think that is a complete mismatch. We saw it for 20, 30 minutes in the cup game where he just absolutely tore him apart, and then Saliba came on and he was a lot better against Haaland. So yeah, I think that's something that needs to happen. We need to get him back ASAP. But going back to the game a little bit, we're sat there, we've been sucker punched, and it's 2-1, and we looked at each other, we went, this can't be happening again, can it? We cannot be conceding another goal to West Ham. We said we just wanted to get to half-time, get to 2-1, which we did at half-time, reset, and then come back out the blocks in the second half.
Exactly, yeah. And to a degree, we did a little bit, didn't we? We started to come into the game a little bit more. Half-time did come at a good point because it allowed us to reset and get back into that dominating fashion that we were in for the majority of that first half. And I think it was on the 51st minute, Martinelli has that shot with the sort of loose ball that spilled out, and then it hits Antonio's hand, which to me, it's a handball, but it's less of a handball than the Rice one. So make that make sense. I don't know. We get the penalty, so you're thinking buzzing. Great opportunity to get sort of back to 3-1 early on in the half, and then we can progress on from there. But sadly, Saka misses the target.
Yeah, that's something that we've not actually come accustomed to this season, is it? Saka actually missing a penalty. And I know I saw loads of backlash on Twitter, people saying, why are you having Saka take a high pressure penalty after, what happened in the Euros. And it's like, have you guys not watched this season? Have you guys not watched how many penalties he's put away this season? This is the first, I'm pretty sure, that he's actually missed this season. And he's converted with such a high success rate that it would have been ludicrous for anybody else to take it. Jesus, we know he's not got a great penalty scoring record, so he wouldn't have been a great option either. So yeah, you can't not let Saka take that penalty, especially when he's put so many away. The only thing for me which is really disappointing is the fact that he missed the target completely. I think if you're a professional player, you've got to get it on target. You absolutely have to. But these things happen, and to top quality players, we saw it in the World Cup. Harry Kane skying that penalty. He's a top quality player who you'd expect to always finish that. We saw it last week. Salah missed a penalty against us, put it wide, similar to Saka's penalty. All players miss penalties now and then. It's going to happen. It's just really disappointing that it came at a time in the game where we were 2-1, and if we were to then put it to 3-1, then West Ham would have been dead and buried. The comeback would have been non-existent for them, and you would have thought we could then see the game out. But it is also quite interesting what you say about Antonio's handball, how it seemed like less of a handball than the Rice one. And I tend to agree as well. The fact that Martinelli, he goes for the shot, and Antonio, he's only about a yard or so away. So it was really difficult for him to actually get out of the way of that shot. So if anything, that's less of a handball than somebody actually handling the ball into their path to then stride on with the ball and create an opportunity. So for me, that's crazy. But albeit it was a handball and should have been a handball just because of where his hand was. It was extended. He made himself bigger and he stopped the shot coming in. So for me, they should both be handballs, and only one went our way, unfortunately. But this was a great opportunity, and it's the sort of opportunity that unfortunately we see Man City take all the time. In their game that they played the other day, they had a penalty, kind of different sort of scenario, but I think they were only were they 1-0 up at the time, or maybe 2-0 up at the time, and then they just killed the game off. Haaland, absolutely, he's so composed, isn't he, on the spot, and you'd never expect him to not bury that. And that's the difference at the minute, isn't it? I think it's just a lack of composure in these high pressure moments. But yeah, so unfortunate to not go 3-1 up at that point.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about with City earlier. They just go for the jugular and they kill the game off. It doesn't matter if it's 2-0, 3-0, they'll just keep going. And we saw in that game against Leicester that they were a bit fatigued in that second half, and Leicester did come back into the game. And that's what can happen in the Premier League. That can happen against anyone. And fortunately for them, they had enough credit in the bank from their goals that it didn't really affect them in the end. It could have been a different story if Leicester had been a little bit more clinical, yes, but ultimately their goal margin got them that win, comfortable in the end, and that's something we've got to learn from. But going back to the Saka penalty miss, if there's any Arsenal fans giving him jip and trying to remind him about the Euros and stuff like that, get a grip. You're not Arsenal fans if that's the case, because, like you said, any player can miss a penalty, and he's been so brilliant ever since that Euros miss. To be fair, I think he's really shown courage to step up and take our penalties, because we don't have a natural penalty taker. It was Aubameyang, and then Saka took that. And usually, it would go to your number 9, your striker. But like you said, Jesus doesn't have a very good record. And even that one he scored, I think it was against Leeds, it wasn't the most convincing, if I'm being honest. I think on another day that gets saved. So, I think Saka's the penalty taker, and that's going to happen every now and again.
Yeah, I think one thing that's worth highlighting as well is the fact that when we say about our key performers of the majority of the games we've had this season, the likes of Partey, the likes of Saka, they really did underperform in this game. Saka especially as well. This was not his best game at all. And I felt quite bad for Mikel Arteta, really, just because Saka had been underperforming. So in my eyes, I thought that maybe the best substitution for him to make in that instance is maybe to bring Saka off and bring on some fresh legs, bring on Trossard maybe in that position. Because as we know, Martinelli, he'd been a threat all game. And he had Kufal on toast on that side. And you always feel like Martinelli's going to be a direct threat all game. So for me, I would have wanted to bring Saka off. But then after he's missed that penalty, what sort of message would that send to Saka that you've missed a penalty and I'm going to take you off? It would have been a really negative message. And then that would have been hanging over his head. So Mikel Arteta in that instance is almost tied to have to keep him on to get him to play himself back into form during the game, or at least not hook him off straight away, because for a young player, then that can really knock your confidence. So that was a difficult one for me. But you know, we can see we missed that goal. We missed that shot, from the penalty, and that was a real turning point in the game because the West Ham fans, they got up. West Ham went straight up the other end a couple of minutes later, and it was such an easily flighted ball over the top of pretty much two banks of our defence, wasn't it? They just one easy ball over the top to Bowen, who he takes it quite well, to be fair to him. He cushions it, similar to the Odegaard goal, actually. He cushions it in a similar position. And Ramsdale, I feel like, if I'm being critical of him, probably should have done better at his near post. He got a hand to it, probably should have saved this one. But I don't want to be too critical of Ramsdale because the amount of points that he saved us this season, even in the Liverpool game in the last match, we could have quite easily lost that if Ramsdale wasn't between the sticks. So not a good moment for him either, really, was it?
Oh, and that was going to be my next question for you, actually. Do you think Ramsdale should have done better there? Because I've not seen too much discussion around this, but it is something that I also thought. He does get a hand to it, and it is a volley at the end of the day, so it's carrying a lot of pace. So maybe we're being a little bit harsh. But I think on another day he probably would save that. He just didn't quite get sight of it or something like that. But like you say, a really frustrating goal to concede, just going straight over a whole team basically, and for him to volley it away like that, it's there's got to be questions asked, hasn't there? And it's a shame because the substitutions in midfield with Jorginho coming in for Partey, I thought actually worked quite well. Jorginho did bring an element of control into the midfield, and we were passing it around a little bit better. So I was thinking, here we go. Can we get it back now with a bit of control into our game? But I think you hit the nail on the head with the other substitution, and that's obviously Trossard coming on. I think he should have come on for Saka, but yeah, like you say, taking him off after a penalty miss doesn't look good, despite that not being the reason. Everyone assumes it's the reason, and that can affect someone mentally. So yeah, it wasn't his best day, and I think unfortunately, again, and this is something that I think is Arteta's biggest weakness, and it is his in-game decision making. His substitutions, they don't always hit the mark. They do sometimes, but a couple of times, and I'm thinking the last two fixtures, West Ham and Liverpool, they've just not been the right substitutions at the right time, and I think it has ultimately maybe cost us 2 points today.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a mirror image of the Liverpool game that he made the wrong decisions at the wrong time as well. When he brought Kivior on in that game, what a strange decision that was for Odegaard, wasn't it? To sacrifice the midfield basically to let Liverpool have all the pressure and all the ability to just run straight through us against what is a makeshift back five, because Holding doesn't usually play. Kyrgios never really played in that back five, and they didn't really know what they were doing. And yeah, very similar in this game where strange substitutions. Jorginho, as you say, yeah, he always looks good when he comes on, to be honest. Even when he starts, he's looked good. Maybe after Partey's performance today, it might be time for him to maybe get thrown into the Southampton game. I think there wasn't much evidence of Partey training up to this game during the week, so maybe he was carrying a bit of a knock. So if we can get him fresh, get him out the team just for one game and get him raring to go for that City game, I think that might actually benefit us if Jorginho can step in for Southampton and if we get over the line in that game. But it's all ifs and buts, isn't it? Bringing Odegaard off as well, I thought that was a strange one because, Odegaard, this also wasn't his best game, but he's someone that's always prodding and probing. We know that Vieira's not quite there yet. Jesus coming off as well. That's strange. If there's any player in our team that can help unlock a defence, it's Jesus, and he only needs one moment to be able to do it. And to bring on Nketiah, who he's quite a direct forward. He wants to run in behind, which we weren't having any joy of either, especially West Ham sat back quite a lot in the second half. It just seemed like a bit of an odd decision from Arteta. But one thing that I would say about Arsenal is we just kind of didn't look like a team that were urging to score again. We almost felt defeated after it was 2-2. There wasn't like an onslaught like we saw from Liverpool against us. They had an onslaught of chances and trying to batter us down and get that winner. We didn't really even wake up then, did we? There wasn't many opportunities falling our way. There wasn't much pressure going on. Even towards the end of the game, we were saying, right, come on, you've got a couple more minutes, just throw everything, throw the kitchen sink at them. And they were just passing it round the back. And you're thinking, come on, make something happen, do something. Someone just take a risk and go for it. But it was almost like they had the tail between their legs and they didn't want to make a mistake and lose the game, did they?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was just a bit of a bad day at the office. And I think by that point, they'd almost accepted the draw. Which, is disappointing in itself. And we should be throwing the kitchen sink at it. But again, the substitutions didn't really reflect that. But it's not really their fault. I mean, this game was sort of crying out for like getting a big centre forward on there, like all the other teams do. And yet we're bringing on Trossard, who's, we need someone in there, creating things, creating chaos. And, he did that to a degree, but it's just not in the right sort of way. So I do wonder if maybe when the summer comes, will we sort of invest in maybe more of a traditional big centre forward, like a Vlahovic, could we were linked with him in the past. That obviously was in Arteta's mind at some point. So is it still in his mind? Is that something that maybe he would think about? Because it would give us that sort of extra option off the bench. Because at the minute, when you look at our bench options, they just don't really fill me with much. I mean, they're all strong players in their own right, but they don't really offer you that sort of that chaos that can grab you something in a game like this. Vieira came on for Odegaard. I don't think I can even recall any touches of note from him. And I thought Odegaard did all right in this game, to be fair. I think he was decent despite the draw. Certainly a lot better than the Liverpool game, that is for sure. But it just lackluster really from the bench.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about getting a tall aerial striker in the summer, and I do think that is somewhere we're really missing this season because yes, it's not the way that we set up, it's not the way that we like to play, but sometimes the way that you like to play doesn't work, and when it's not working, you need to change it. And when you're going to change it, you got to bring on a big forward. And as you say, kitchen sink time. last 10 minutes, just get that big forward in the box and lump as many balls in there as you can. And then, you play a numbers game. Hopefully he gets his head on the end of it. It's the sort of game that you wish you had Olivier Giroud on the bench, don't you? To be able to bring him on and fumble it into the net, however he used to do. To be fair, he used to love scoring against West Ham, didn't he? Some of his goals, but gone are those days. Unfortunately, we ended up drawing this game, a game that we all were expecting us to win, especially with West Ham being in the position that they're in. But we can't underestimate these teams that are near the bottom of the table. They're also scrapping, fighting for their lives, and there are going to be a lot of twists and turns in these last few weeks. You can't write any of these teams off. Man City as well, they've got to play a few of these teams, and you never know. One of them might just step up and perform and do us a favour, or ultimately they could, do it against us. So it's never a given in the Premier League. Even Southampton next week, I don't think that's a given. Even though they're bottom of the table, they could surprise us. So we've got to be on our A game, and we've got to be getting maximum points from this game and killing the games when we're ahead. When we're 2-0 up, we can't be sacrificing leads like we have in the last two games. It's not acceptable. And if you want to win a Premier League, you just simply can't do that.
Yeah, and we're going to need to bury that sort of 2-0 hoodoo thing now, which it's going to be difficult because best case scenario, we go 2-0 up. You're thinking brilliant, but in the back of your mind and in the back of the players' minds, it's going to be this Liverpool game. It's going to be this West Ham game. So now we've got that sort of extra little thing to think about. So yes, it isn't a guaranteed 3 points. No game is, but it's one where if we don't get 3 points with that fixture going into the Man City one, then then we're sort of. We're panicking a little bit. Let's be honest. So fingers crossed we can get the win there, and then at least we're going into that City fixture with 3 points behind us, a bit of confidence. Hopefully, Saliba's back. Maybe some rested players in the Southampton game. Who knows? And then let's go toe to toe with Man City, and winner takes all. You'd like to think.
Yeah. Yeah, it does really have that feel about it, doesn't it? The whole winner takes all aspect of it. And the thing that I also want to bring up is the fact that if we do beat Southampton, then we could go into that game against Man City with a 7 or 8 point gap between us and Man City. So that, I know they will have 2 games in hand, but psychologically it is a massive gap. We've got the points on the board, and they're thinking they've got to compete in the FA Cup, they've got to compete in the Champions League, they've got to compete in the Premier League. And as we saw, although they have such strength in depth, these players were wiltering at the end of that Leicester game, as you said earlier. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they're going to have to rotate, and they're going to have to maybe prioritise one or the other. And I think in Man City's eyes, if they're going to prioritise anything, it would be the Champions League. Unfortunately for us, they won the first leg 3-0 against Bayern Munich, so potentially they might even rest players in the second leg. I don't know if they would, but I'm saying they might not even, Haaland might have a rest. They bring on Alvarez and see if they can see the game out. And we don't want to have a cyborg recharging. That's one thing that we absolutely don't want. But this is something that I'm getting sucked into, and all Arsenal fans are getting sucked into, is the fact that I'm focusing on Man City and what they're doing. And I know it is important, but at the same time, if we win all of our matches until the end of the season, then we've won the league. It is that simple. If we win all our games, we've won the league. So that's what we need to do, game by game, 3 points and 3 points, and then we'll be there. And if we're there or thereabouts in the last few games, then we've got a real chance of doing it. And yeah, the last 2 games of the season, we've got, I think it's Nottingham Forest and Wolves. Forest, they could be dead and buried by that point. And Wolves, they could be on the beach. So you're thinking, fingers crossed. And then Man City, they've got Brighton away as their last game, which is a really tough game, isn't it? And they've got Brentford as well. So it's not over just yet. I know it's really disappointing to get 2 points from 2 games in these last 2 games, one that you're really expecting to win. But I think in our prediction, we said that we would probably lose the game at Anfield and win this game. So we're actually only 1 point behind schedule. So it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
It's not. And City aren't winning all their remaining games. There's just no way that's happening. I know they won the last 10, but we'll forget about that. Like, they're gonna drop points at some point. I just can feel it. The only thing is, we quite possibly could too. So it's going to go down to the wire, I think. And like we keep saying, this game on Wednesday next week is going to be huge. But to be honest, I come away from this chat feeling kind of more. I just feel more confident now. I feel better about it. I think it's been some sort of like therapy for me. So I hope that's come across for the listeners too.
The Arsenal Ramble therapy session is everything that you need to get rid of the doom and gloom and the woes of the Arsenal dropping points. It's definitely a good thing. Is there anything else that you want to touch on from today's game at all, or should we wrap it up, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up. I think we've talked about just about everything there.
Okay, guys, just to let you all know, if you fancy giving us a bit of extra support, for the price of a cup of coffee, we actually have a link in our description, and it's for buymeacoffee.com. Just a little something if you want to show us some support, and we'll be eternally grateful if you were to do that. So thought we'd drop that in there as well. And we will be back next week after we play Southampton. Until next time, see you later, guys.
Take care, guys. Bye.